At 24 years old, James Dean reveals the gay male actors in classic Hollywood that he secretly dated, and it's not all good. Imagine a young man with melancholic sad eyes, tousled hair, and a captivating smile. But behind that are dark secrets that old Hollywood tried to hide at all costs. We will explore his life in the most detailed way, from painful childhood wounds to concealed same-sex romances, and how the conservative society of that time forced stars to live in the shadows, to pretend to sacrifice themselves to survive under the bright but cold neon lights of Tinseltown. This is not just a story about forbidden love, but also a profound lesson about acceptance, forgiveness, and humanity's long journey toward diversity and equity in perceptions of human sexuality. First, let's talk about James Dean. The name that many of you are probably familiar with through classic films like Rebel Without a Cause or East of Eden. Born on February 8, 1931 in Marion, Indiana, USA, James Byron. Dean grew up in an ordinary family, but his life was soon shrouded in the shadow of tragedy. As the only son of Mildred Marie Wilson and Winton Dean, Dean had an initially peaceful childhood in Indiana, where his father worked as a farmer, tending vast cornfields under the wide sky of the American Midwest. Mildred, his mother, was the only woman who truly understood and nurtured his artistic soul. She encouraged Dean to write down his dreams in old notebooks, taught him to play the violin with gentle classical music, the bongo with lively rhythms, tap dancing with quick steps, and ballet with poetic grace from when he was very young. Perhaps only 4 or 5 years old. She often called him Mommy's little Jimmy, and that mother-son relationship was the only light, the spiritual support in the early years of economic hardship for the family. The family moved to Santa Monica, California, when Dean was 6 years old, because his father Winton gave up farming to study and become a dental technician at a veterans hospital, hoping to find a better life on the sunny, windy West Coast. Life in California brought new hope, with long beaches, crashing waves, and a freer atmosphere compared to rural Indiana. But then, tragedy struck suddenly and cruelly. In 1940, when Dean was only 9 years old, his mother passed away from uterine cancer after a short battle with the disease lasting just a few months. This loss was a tremendous shock, causing Dean to suddenly cry at school, suffer from chronic insomnia, and have erratic mood swings, wounds that followed him throughout his life, turning him into an inwardly stormy person. According to biographers, Dean once recounted that he would sit alone in the backyard, looking up at the deep blue sky and wondering why life was so unfair, why God took away the only woman who loved him unconditionally. He grew up in a Quaker environment, a branch of Protestantism that emphasizes simplicity, peace, and personal ethics. But the void left by his mother made him feel deeply isolated, like a black hole swallowing all childhood joy. His father, Winton, couldn't care for his son alone amid the grief of losing his wife and the burden of work. So he sent Dean to live with his Aunt Hortense and Uncle Marcus Winslow on their farm in Fairmount, Indiana. This was the Winslow family farm, where Dean was raised by his aunt and uncle, strict Quakers who taught him about manual labor, religious ethics, and family values. This decision made Dean feel completely abandoned, like losing both parents at once, creating a psychological scar that never healed. His father later joined World War II, remarried Ethel Case, and had little contact with his son, making the father-son relationship even more tense, full of resentment and prolonged silence. When Dean returned to California after graduating high school, in 1949 conflicts over career paths erupted. His father wanted him to study law for a stable, safe life as a lawyer, while Dean was passionate about acting, yearning for the stage and lights, leading to a wordless hostility between them, making Dean even more isolated. These traumas shaped a lonely, rebellious young man, always craving love, acceptance, and a place in a chaotic, prejudiced world. And then, in Fairmount, Dean sought a father figure in Reverend James DeWeerd, a local Methodist pastor with a rather eccentric lifestyle. DeWeerd, often called Dr. Weird because of quirky hobbies like collecting skulls and telling ghost stories, introduced him to bullfighting, a dangerous Spanish sport that he became fascinated with through books, car racing, dangerous hobbies that later shaped Dean's rebellious image on screen and theater in his final high school years, around 1948 to 1949. This relationship started as a mentor-student friendship lasting several years and was described as intimate in chronicles. However, later reports and revelations from friends and biographers suggest this relationship may have involved sexual abuse starting around age 11 to 12, right after his mother's death, when Dean was most vulnerable. Dean confided his deepest pain about this to Elizabeth Taylor, his co-star in Giant, who kept the secret throughout her life and only revealed it after her death in 2011, describing it as the deepest pain that Dean never overcame, a wound that made him fear true intimacy. Taylor said, "It wouldn't help either of us if I revealed it then, due to concerns about affecting Dean's reputation in a still stigmatizing society." Biographers like Kevin Sessoms in his book and reports from 2011 to 2025 confirmed D. Weird's involvement, and this experience may have shaped how Dean used relationships to advance his career, often called gay for pay, where he accepted sexual connections in exchange for opportunities. This abuse not only caused psychological trauma, but also contributed to Dean's emotional instability, making him prone to complex, painful romances filled with longing for recognition, always seeking substitute parents in older men. Now, let's move to the most mysterious part, James Dean's hidden sexuality, a topic that has sparked controversy for decades, from biographies to online forums today. In 1949, after high school, Dean went to California to study law, as his father wished, but quickly dropped out after just a few months because he felt constrained and switched to studying drama at the University of California, where he began exploring his true passion at a campus play audition amid the vibrant atmosphere of the campus with enthusiastic young students. He met future screenwriter William Bast. They shared a cramped dorm room full of books and scripts and developed a complex relationship that lasted 5 years, a romance that was both passionate and chaotic. Bast wrote the first biography of Dean, but only revealed the details in 2006 due to legal restrictions from Warner Brothers and the conservative society at the time, where homosexuality was seen as deviant. According to Bast, they had a stormy romance, once spending the night in a desert hotel with howling winds and twinkling stars, even sharing girlfriends like comedian Beverly Wills to conceal it. Bast described Dean as elusive, always seeking connection but fearing commitment, often staying up all night talking about Hollywood dreams. While working at radio industry networking events to support himself amid cocktail parties with echoing jazz music. Dean met Rogers Brackett, a successful 35-year-old radio director with a deep voice. They quickly became romantically involved when Dean was just 20, with Brackett playing the role of a protective father figure. Brackett took him to fancy restaurants like Chasen's with delicious steaks, bought new clothes from high-end stores on Rodeo Drive, introduced him to industry people, and they moved in together in a luxury Los Angeles apartment in 1951 with a view of the Pacific Ocean. Brackett had a reputation for gay for pay, but for Dean, he was a lover and mentor, helping him enter the treacherous entertainment world. When asked about living with a famous gay man, Dean simply said, "Yes, I know, but I have my own room." A vague response showing defensiveness. Biographers like Venable Herndon accused Dean of being Brackett's kept boy, meaning he was supported in exchange for sex, a common practice in Hollywood at the time. About a year later, Brackett moved to Chicago for work, leaving Dean saddened, evoking the feeling of abandonment from childhood, losing his mother at 9, being sent away by his father, plus the pain from Reverend DeWeird. However, Brackett didn't leave Dean empty-handed. He suggested pursuing a career in New York, funding travel, housing, and tuition at the actor's studio, where he honed method acting techniques, bringing more naturalism to roles under the guidance of Lee Strasberg, the legendary teacher who trained Marlon Brando as well. Dean moved to New York with the loyal Bast through vibrant New York nights. At underground jazz clubs with swirling cigarette smoke, he met Eartha Kitt, the 1960s Catwoman, with a seductive voice, and writer John Gilmore, a companion in the late-night adventures. They experimented sexually with each other in cramped rooms in Greenwich Village. Gilmore wrote in The Real James Dean, We were bad boys playing bad boy games. While opening up the bisexual side, Gilmore believed Dean leaned more toward homosexuality, describing him as gayer than bi, meaning more gay than bisexual, with moments where Dean confessed his sexual confusion. At the actor's studio during an intense improv acting workshop, Dean met Paul Newman, whom he was immediately infatuated with, drawn to his blue eyes and warm smile. He suggested performing a love scene in front of the class to set the studio on fire, but Newman gently declined. "Hey buddy, take it easy." Dean persisted, and according to Brackett, telling David Dalton and the man behind the Baby Blues, Dean confessed, "I got Paul to grab me at the door of an abandoned building under dim streetlights." Sex was more exciting in dangerous public places, adding adrenaline. Also, through the actor's studio, Dean attended a guest lecture by Marlon Brando, his idol from A Streetcar Named Desire. He was immediately obsessed with Brando making harassing phone calls and sleeping outside his door in Greenwich Village. Friends said Dean imitated Brando's style, from wearing leather jackets to his low voice, even buying a motorcycle to match his idol. Brando commented, "But Mr. John seems to be wearing my wardrobe from last year and using my talent from last year." I recommended a psychiatrist, and at least his work improved. But Brando knew how to exploit what both enjoyed: sadomasochism, a dark kink. Dean's coroner noted his body was full of scars, as he liked having cigarettes stubbed out on his chest during passionate, painful moments. Natalie Wood, a girlfriend from Rebel Without a Cause, said this was why they broke up. "Sometimes Jimmy liked to hurt his partners, and I couldn't take the pain." Wood recounted that Dean often cried during night shoots, sharing about his abused childhood, making her feel heartbroken. By 1954, Dean's career hadn't taken off despite his best efforts. He appeared in Pepsi commercials, played John the Baptist in a TV Easter program in classical costume, and had cameos in 3 Hollywood films like Has Anyone Seen My Gal?, in an unnamed small role, Sailor Beware with Dean Martin, and Fixed Bayonets as a soldier. In New York, thanks to Brackett, he did radio and CBS TV like episodes of Kraft Television Theater, and his first Broadway role in See the Jaguar in 1952, a failure, due to weak script, running only a few weeks. During this time, Dean had a relationship with CBS director Bob Stevens, who was new on the job. According to director James Sheldon in a Hollywood Reporter interview, "I never had relations with him. I know a guy who gave Jimmy work. They did that, but director Bob Stevens did. They had a little affair before Jimmy became famous, a short romance that helped Dean get a foot in TV, but it wasn't TV or radio that made Dean stand out, but another Broadway play, The Immoralist, in 1954, where he played a gay young man seducing tourists, a role that reflected his personal life and received high praise from the New York Times." With positive reviews, Brackett brought Dean back to Hollywood for Elia Kazan's East of Eden, based on John Steinbeck's novel about brothers Cain and Abel. Kazan disliked Dean for his erratic temperament, calling him a little monster in his diary, but still gave him the role of Cal Trask, the rebellious son seeking his father's love, mirroring Dean's own childhood. This role earned Dean his first posthumous Oscar nomination in 1956. The film tells of brothers Cal and Aaron, with Cal always feeling rejected by his father, reflecting Dean's life with Wynton. Dean acted naturally, full of emotion, making audiences empathize with his inner pain, like the scene where he cries when his father rejects the money he earned from beans. With momentum from East of Eden, combined with his unexpected and authentic acting style, Dean continued with Nicholas Ray's Rebel Without a Cause. The film is a masterpiece about 1950s teens, with Dean as Jim Stark, a rebellious teenager moving to a new town, facing violence and social pressures from parents and peers. The film features Natalie Wood as Judy and Sal Mineo as Plato, with the iconic chicken run scene racing cars to a cliff under moonlight symbolizing youthful recklessness. Ray said Dean embodied rebellion, and the film reflected post-war society where youth felt lost between materialism and spirituality. Dean died before the film's release, making it legendary with huge box office and cultural impact. Sal Mineo recounted, "Jimmy was sensitive. He cried real tears in family breakdown scenes, and we often talked about loneliness. Finally, George Stevens' Giant, based on Edna Ferber's novel, with Dean as Jet Rink, a farmer-turned-oil millionaire, alongside Elizabeth Taylor as Leslie and Rock Hudson as Bick. The 3-hour film explores class and racial divides in Texas with vast shots in Marfa. Dean clashed with Hudson over temperament but was close to Taylor, whom he confided in about abuse and saw as a mother. The role of Jet was his most complex, from poverty to lonely wealth, with the final scene of him drunkenly talking to an empty chair, symbolizing emptiness. The film earned Dean his second Oscar nomination, completing his legacy with 3 major films in 18 months. However, his off-screen reputation worried the studio, as Dean was known for dating agents and actors, mostly men. 1950 as Hollywood treated gay actors harshly, with the Hays Code banning depictions of homosexuality, forcing them to hide like Rock Hudson, who had a sham marriage to Phyllis Gates. Dean was on the eligible bachelor list with Hudson and Tab Hunter, and photos with actresses were staged by agent Henry Wilson. This made it hard to distinguish real from fake, with magazines like Confidential spreading rumors for blackmail. In East of Eden, he had a 35-month affair with Geraldine Page, while rooming with Bast, a strange love triangle. In Hollywood photos with Terry Moore, Ursula Andress from Dr. No, Liz Sheridan wrote a book, Dizzy and Jimmy, claiming to date Dean in 1952. Even Marilyn Monroe confessed thinking about marriage, but said we would destroy each other as both were unstable. But Sheldon emphasized this was common, then claiming to date James Dean to get famous as many actresses did to boost their value. No romance was discussed more than with Pier Angeli, the Italian star from The Silver Chalice, though she suddenly married Vic Damone while dating him, which biographers like Paul Alexander saw as MGMPR to cover up. Angeli later said Jimmy was my only love, but tragically, she committed suicide in 1971, leaving a letter mentioning Dean with regret. In his autobiography, Kazan dismissed Dean succeeding with women. He always had uncertain relationships with girlfriends full of suspicion and jealousy. The director and screenwriter of Rebel Without a Cause claimed he was exclusively gay with Ray, saying Dean often went to gay bars in New York. Among his affairs were Clifton Webb from Laura and Jack Simmons, a supporting actor. When asked if he was gay, Dean said no, but I won't go through life with one hand tied behind my back, a famous quote showing bisexuality. He avoided military service by admitting homosexuality in a 1951 medical exam, a common way during McCarthyism to avoid Vietnam or Korea. Over time, Dean has been celebrated as the greatest LGBT icon, not just for his private life, but for his androgynous, sensitive on-screen aura representing marginalized youth. In Rebel Salmoneo's Plato admires Jim, suggesting homosexuality causing stirs and cuts in some states. This stirred a conservative environment used to linking motorcycles, fast cars, rebellion with heterosexual masculinity like John Wayne or Clark Gable. As biographer Val Holly said, it created a paradox. Gay affairs presented as career advancement, straight ones as maintenance to avoid scandal. In 1997, Elizabeth Taylor said of Dean, "He hadn't decided yet, only 24 when he died, but he definitely liked women. He flirted with everyone, and she saw Dean as a son, often hugging him when he cried." From my personal perspective as a lover of Hollywood history, James Dean's story moves me deeply. Many of you who lived through that era probably remember well when homosexuality was considered criminal taboo, with laws like the Hays Code controlling films, forcing actors to hide themselves to avoid jail or job loss. Dean died in 1955 at age 24 in a Porsche Spyder car accident on the highway near Cholome, California. He was driving at high speed after filming Giant, colliding with Donald Turnipseed's Ford, dying instantly, with mechanic Rolf Witherick surviving but severely injured. News spread quickly via radio and press. Fans gathered crying at the scene, and his legacy exploded with soaring ticket sales. Hollywood once hid and blackmailed like Brackett, demanding $800 from Dean to keep secrets before East of Eden, a harsh industry reality. Today, with films like the biopic on Dean's gay romance with Bast, Starring Brandon Flynn and Rebel Hart slated for 2025, we see great progress from Stonewall riots to legal same-sex marriage. But it's still far as ex-post show. Debates on acknowledging Dean as bisexual or gay, with fans defending his macho image, I find inspiration here. Dean teaches us that love has no limits, and though society changes slowly, truth always finds its way to light through books, films, and personal stories. For those who've witnessed discrimination, think of this journey as a reminder that accepting sexual diversity is key to a better society where people can live authentically without fear. After more than 65 years, humanity has made little progress in understanding sexual diversity, and it still weighs heavily in our lives, whether we like it or not. Early traumas shaped a complex man's inner pain, driving his legendary status. Dean once said, "Dream as if you'll live forever. Live as if you'll die today. Dream like you're immortal. Live like tomorrow doesn't exist." That's his spirit and legacy for us today, in a world still fighting for LGBT rights. To expand further, let's talk about Dean's influence on music and fashion. Many artists, like the Eagles with the song James Dean, praise him as too fast to live, too young to die, or David Bowie drawing inspiration from him for the androgynous image in the Ziggy Stardust album. In modern films, rebellious characters like in The Breakfast Club or Riverdale bear Dean's mark with leather jackets and defiant attitudes. He was also a fashion icon with Levi's 501 jeans, the red jacket and rebel influencing Gucci and Prada today. With collections inspired by him socially, Dean contributed to the 1950s youth movement, rebelling against post-war rigidity, paving the way for 1960s hippies and the sexual freedom movement. Moreover, Dean's life is a lesson on art's power to reflect society. In Giant, the role of Jet Rink shows American social change. From farmer to oil tycoon, reflecting the shattered American dream amid racism and classism, Taylor recounted. Dean often stayed up all night preparing roles, and he said, "Acting is the most lonely profession in the world. Acting is the loneliest job because you live in others' roles." This reflected his loneliness from abandoned childhood to fake Hollywood life, where friends were colleagues and love was secret. On the LGBT front, Dean is an icon for daring to authentically live in shadows, though not openly like Elton John later. Critics like Vito Russo in The Celluloid Closet analyze how Rebel has queer elements with Plato as the first sympathetic gay character on screen, despite censorship. 1950 Hollywood forced gay actors like Montgomery Clift or Anthony Perkins to hide, leading to personal tragedies like addiction or suicide. Dean, though not out-challenged with sensitive gender-neutral images like wearing pink and Rebel a color than for women. Finally, Dean's death was a fateful tragedy, but also the start of legend. On September 31, 1955, he drove his Porsche 550 Spider, nicknamed Little Bastard, which he carved himself to a race in Salinas after filming Giant. Colliding with Donald Turnipseed's Ford at the junction of Highways 41 and 46, Dean died on the spot with a broken neck. Mechanic Rolf Witherick survived, but was severely injured later, recounting Dean was going 85 miles per hour. News spread quickly via radio and press. Fans gathered crying at the scene, and his legacy exploded with soaring ticket sales for Rebel and Giant. Museums in Fairmount, Indiana honor him with annual festivals, and his grave at Park Cemetery still receives thousands of fans visiting, leaving flowers and handwritten letters with other Hollywood secrets, wishing you a peaceful and thoughtful day.